Hi, everybody. You're tuned in to Where Waters Meet, a podcast featuring discussions on fly fishing, art, all things outdoors with a conservation focus. Hey, everybody. It's Alex and Johnny.
Oh, hey, man.
With Where Waters Meet podcast. And we're doing a big show today. But first, what have you been up to?
Not much of my trip to Ohio got canceled. It's like totally blown out down there.
No.
Yeah, they Mike sent me a video of like this bridge. It's like almost up to the bridge and there's just ice dams everywhere. He's like, so it's probably not fishing that great. So,
Well, it might make bridge fishing easier.
maybe.
Yeah.
It'll suck out of a raft, but
I was excited to see how you did.
yeah, well, I still think I'm going to go down. Just going to push it down to the end of the month.
A little later.
Yep. End of March, maybe beginning of April.
Hopefully the flows will be good.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we have a good consistent spring here too.
Me too. I hope it kind of tapers off any more precipitation that we get and it just gradually melts.
Hey, I need snow for skiers to come to the yurts. Yeah. But no, I hear you. Yeah. It would be good if we just consistent melting and just nothing severe.
Yeah.
Hopefully we don't have like 5 inches of rain in some event or something.
Yeah, like we've typically been getting in the springs.
It's crazy.
Yep.
It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. It'd be just nice, easy, like manageable steps rather than just boom.
I know. You never know here. The weather keeps seems more and more severe, but at least we got through this winter, the beginning of the winter, without anything severe like in previous years. So, but hopefully, yeah, March that'll be neat to see how you guys do.
Yeah,
you like steelhead on their
yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, still be going out for steelhead. Hopefully streamers. So that's what I want to do anyway.
I know.
So sick at nymphing.
I know. Yeah, we nymph a lot for steelhead in the fall, which is when we've always gone. You've never gone out to the Great Lakes in the spring, have you?
No, and this was my first trip this year going out in like winter-ish too. Which was kind of fun. I wish I had more time, but
I got to get out. Man, steelhead on streamers sounds like two of my favorite things.
Yeah,
I haven't been able to combine the two. That would be killer. That would be really, really nice. Yeah. But yeah. We were just joking around before we started that we should make a call to Howler Brothers, see if they can sponsor us or something. But we've gotten deep.
We are deep.
You're deep. You got you got your OG shirt. We don't even know what the name of this shirt is. Yeah,
it's an old one.
Yeah, good clothing lasts a long time. And I got my. I don't even know what you call this shirt. I just bought it. It says Howler Brothers all over it.
It says it a lot.
I'm doing a good job.
You are.
I'm doing a good job advertising for them.
They really should give you some stuff.
They did. I mean, look, I got a lot of real estate here too, so like, billboard, Alex, the billboard guy.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, Howler Brothers, we're just here, just humble guys.
Yeah. I use you guys most exclusively for sun protection too, the hoodies.
Yeah. And I do. I love all their button ups, and their thicker button ups have become my kind of go tos around the yurts here too as well. Like I love them. Like days like today, going and getting heaters started and stuff, and hoodies, jackets.
I wear their gauchos a lot.
Yeah, John liked the gauchos.
A little flashy.
Yeah, little pizzazz. Yeah. They don't make underwear yet, though.
No.
Underwear and socks, Howler Brothers.
They make socks.
Do they?
Yep.
Oh my word! I haven't even got into that.
Yeah, accessories. Click on that tab.
All right. Well, that's enough of our shameless ploy.
Yeah, sponsor us.
Look into our eyes. Anyways, but moving on. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but there is a new painting up on the easel, and it is titled Brown Town. I should have some James Brown music playing right now. But yeah, that's actually a photo of a fish. Well, it's based off from a photo of a fish that John and I caught. Well, John caught it. I was rowing, and that's John's hand.
Yeah. I think you maybe like made it a little smaller, my hand.
Your
Meat hook.
Your thumb might have gone on a weight loss program.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was that's John's hand after drinking a can of Slim Fast.
I like it.
That's called artistic, expression, John. Like I can, I can adjust accordingly, but
I like it. I like the background, especially. I like the rocks and stuff you did.
that was the fun part about it. It was a neat photo composition in that I like the angle of the fish and the way that it was presented. You were holding it, that way, but it actually was over a net and it was in the air. And but I was like, this would look really neat with the rocks, and I had never really tackled like a rock background, and it was a blast.
Yeah, I like it.
It's John's hand if he's an anorexic.
I like all your stuff. I like looking at your stuff, and I like try to figure out where that fish came from.
Yeah.
It's like, I was probably around for that one.
Yeah. There's probably a lot of them that we both have a memory of the fish, but I do remember that one because we caught it near the big rock, and it was out of that foam hole that we always hit, and it was in the fall, and it was I couldn't anchor.
No.
And it was a first cast, and it was pow.
Yeah, that spot we always hit, and it's always a flyby, like hit this pocket, and you get one shot at it.
Yeah. And and he was there, and it was I think that those are some of my most memorable fish, though, is like when
Those
you
are
aren't
fun.
anchored, and
the pressure's on. Yeah.
the pressure's on.
It's just super fun.
And the teamwork, it's just and it's also fun. You and I have talked a lot about how we get excited when there's somebody in the front of the boat that fishes hard.
Yeah.
It makes it so worth rowing hard. You don't mind digging a little deeper to like stall the boat so that they can maybe get 2 casts into a spot, if somebody's really working it.
Oh, one of my favorites was you, me, and your cousin Derek.
Yeah.
We're out and we were like psyching Derek. Derek was pretty new. We're psyching Derek up. He's in the front of the boat, and you're like, Derek, you got to hit this. You got to hit this log that's laid down on the side of the bank. You got to hit this. Be ready. Be ready. Be ready. And he's like all stoked and getting psyched up, and he totally blew his cast. It went to and I'm like in the back, and I'm not quite positioned right because you had it set up easy for Derek.
Yeah.
So he was really close. Yeah. And I'm like, I got it. And I'm like, wow. And I do this huge bomb, and like as soon as it hits, bam, got a brown town.
That was a nice brown too. I think he tangled in the front. It was funny because there were some explicatives going on, and he was pretty frustrated. And it was cool because John saved me because I was digging. I was having to dig hard. The flow on that corner, it's basically all this wood gets pushed up on this bend, and so you got to kind of get that boat angled. You can't crab crawl away from it. You got to have an angle. So John kind of was flipping over my head. And that fish came out. You remember he missed it though? I remember it came out and it went for it and did the slash thing. And I'm like, oh, and then it came after it. Like it was one of those fish where the switch killed, like
it flipped.
It flipped like, I'm going to kill that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it didn't give up.
No, it didn't.
Like it was one missed attempt. Whether it was trying to stun it or not, I don't know.
And it's funny because it's like one of those spots where you like, there always should be a fish there.
Yeah.
But it's like 70-30 if there actually is. And it just, it was on that day.
Yeah. It was textbook. It was like, you look at it, you're like, this is the greatest situation, the greatest like structure, flow, depth, everything that went into it. You're like, there should be a trout right here.
Yep.
And there was. And that's when you're calling it out in the boat, like when you're rowing and you're calling it out to the guys fishing, and then when it happens, you just you feel like Superman.
Yeah.
And then usually after that you get humbled for a couple miles.
Yeah. Well, that was it for the day. Let's have lunch.
Yeah, you're like, I predicted the bite was going to be a little bit off this afternoon after that. It's we got, Sun's, right over the top of our head. The wind's picked up a little bit, and yeah, right. Oh my word. See, that's what paintings do. And fish photos. It takes you down.
Yeah.
Takes you down a memory.
Yeah. I think the paintings invoke more memory. I mean, if you got a photo,
Yeah.
you got it locked in, but then you look at a painting, you have to like reach back into your mind and search for it.
Yeah. It's fun for me because usually if I do paint it, I have a feeling, involved with it. So I like it.
An emotional response. Yeah.
And that's why commissioned work is harder for me. I do it, but it is harder because like you have to try to get into that mental space.
Yeah, try to invest into that person's memory.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously it's helpful because if somebody said, here's a photo of a very, memorable brown trout or something like that, it's a brown trout. So I mean, like obviously it's, I don't paint barns and stuff like that because I can't kind of get there. But yeah, fish. Fish and paintings, but we won't go too deep down that because we got like we got a bit of a, I would say, heavy topic. I mean, kind of somewhat controversial amongst certain crowds. It's to be quite honest with you, it will probably be something that we talk about.
Yeah, we'll probably keep coming back to it.
We probably will, and we'll have some more in-depth discussions involving some of the research that's out there that we've read and, some of the prominent people that are responsible for different forms of management that focus differently than what we're going to be bringing up.
Yeah. Yep.
So I guess that probably we should just get into what it is. And we're going to be talking about stock trout.
Oh, hold on. We're going to do on the fly first? On the Vice?
We are going to do that.
Sorry.
I just
want to stay on format.
Oh my word.
You just want to get into the meat.
I want to get into that. I just jumped the gun. I'm sorry, guys. Now you guys are just going to have to wait. We're gonna talk about that big controversial topic, and it's not about the zebra midge. That's not controversial at all.
No, I don't think anybody's gonna say the zebra midge. That doesn't work.
Yeah, they're gonna say, "Oh my, you wouldn't believe what Alex and Johnny talked about." They talked about a zebra midge. I'm not even gonna listen to that podcast anymore. So the On the Vice section, which we do every week, which I just skimmed over and didn't read on my magical little board in front of me, but John has better reading skills. Today is about the zebra midge.
Yeah. Yeah. And couldn't find a more simple pattern, I don't think.
No, actually, the midges that we have here, and we're gonna cut to a little film of it right now because they're so small. Like if we hold them up, it's not gonna do any good, but you guys will see what they look like. Probably most of you already know, but yeah, they're super simple. And some of these here I tied like 14 years ago.
Yeah. I think it was one of the first patterns I ever tied.
Yeah.
Woolly bugger, zebra midge.
Yeah. And I think that the only difficulty in it, if you're first starting, is probably the size.
Yeah.
But you can tie them bigger than what I think these are probably 18s or 20s here.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, you just need thread. You need wire and you need a bead.
Yep. And a hook.
Yeah. And the properly shaped hook, which I think is, it's tied on a midge hook or a scud hook or a caddis shaped hook, which is just a rounded hook bend. It kind of has a continuous bend to it. And I don't know, when's your favorite time to fish the zebra midge, John?
Well, I like fishing them over finicky fish.
Yep.
Fall or spring, I guess is when I like using them. And like when stuff doesn't seem to be working and I like say, okay, I got to give up and I have to nymph now.
Yeah.
And yep. I mean, that is a great a trailer. I usually use that as a bottom fly,
Yeah.
So
yeah, I do the same thing. I have fished it underneath buoyant midge dries, before.
Dropper.
But for the most part, and if I do that, it's more of like a zebra style that doesn't have a bead. But I do usually nymph it. I use it most in late season, early season, like you said, finicky fish, more cold water times.
Yeah, cold water. Yep.
Yeah, because midge pupa are available and they're in the flow kind of year round. And so there's a lot of fish that will key in on them. Tailwaters, there's usually a lot of midge activity on streams that come out of reservoirs or lakes and bodies of water. They're very heavy in still water, so you see a lot of them in places like that, and they're very, very, very effective.
Yep. And black's the classic, but I also I tie them in red. I see that you tied some in green, which is great. You always got to have like a little small green something, and it imitates a lot of stuff. Little tiny things.
I've caught, I've
the
caught,
red ones I like tying, like you can tie them a little bigger. Like I tie them up to like a 16.
Yep. Look like a red worm or something. Yeah,
exactly.
I've caught fish on pretty much every color that you could even imagine. I've done black thread bodies with orange wire, copper wire. I've done blue wire on black. I've done blue threaded bodies with black wire. I would say that probably my favorite colors though are variations of black and variations of red, like you said.
Yeah. The classic is just black thread, silver wire, and silver bead, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And what's funny is like I have found when I'm fishing with them, the black will be very effective. But if the black isn't effective for some reason, like there's been many times where I will just swap to red and it's crazy. I'll fish the same area and that is just such a keyed on color. And I do think that if you have fish in really cold water that are keyed in on midges, they get pretty smart about color. So I think that it is good to have a lot of color variation in your box.
Yeah.
And like brassies too, those are another good midge imitation. But
you and I were fishing someplace this late fall. It was pretty cold, and you had a little flurry of action, and then it died down, and I switched over to a red one a little bit, and then I had a little flurry of action.
Yeah,
and you're like, "What are you using?" And I'm like, "Red Zebra Midge."
Yeah,
it was just weird.
It is weird. But I think that probably anybody that nymphs or wants to fish cold water periods of time, or even midsummer, if you're in a very finicky fishery, and especially if you're fishing, I would say kind of close to a dam.
Yep.
I think that they're great, and I think that if you're learning to tie flies, they're an awesome fly to start out with.
I think it's a must-have in your box. Yeah, you have to have some of them.
You do. You have to. It is. That's my go-to like midge, subsurface midge presentation, I would say.
I agree. Yeah.
And I mean, I fish brassies and I like disco midges. There's a lot of like little midge variations and Griffith's gnats. Like if you ever want to, just everybody should have a couple of those too in their box too, and that's for those listening, that's a dry fly midge presentation. And so, if they aren't eating the midges on the bottom and you happen to see a midge hatch and they're up on top, it's nice to have a couple of those in the box so you can throw those out.
Yep.
But I think if you're learning how to tie flies, the neatest thing about a zebra midge is you get to learn how to tie in the wire.
Yep.
Which, for listeners, you tie in the wire and then once you wrap the thread body, the wire wraps around the thread body and gives it its segmentation and a little bit of flash. And I think the other thing that's really important when you're starting out that it's an awesome opportunity for is that I struggled with when I first started fly tying is learning how to wrap thread in a way that you create a taper.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the idea of the zebra midge is that it's got a curved hook. You have a bead at the top. You tie your thread in and you get down to the base of the hook. You tie in the wire. Then you take that thread and you got to wrap a lot. and you're trying to create a taper from the base of the hook at the bottom of the bend all the way up to the head where the bead is. And it's a challenge when you first start tying flies to get a nice consistent taper. You know, either it's too fat at the bottom and too thin at the top, or it varies, you know. It's a good fish to, I mean, it's a good fly to practice that. And then, you know, then you learn how to finish off that wire at the head and make it look kind of clean too. So there is some difficulties at times with it, but it's simple as far as you aren't having to tie in feathers and, you know.
Yeah, basically you're just trying to make a nice smooth body. And then like you want a fairly fine thread when you do that.
You do. I like UTC when I use it, but I don't really use Unithread or any of those. I know so many people use it. Like, I've never really gotten into using Danville thread or anything like that, or Vivus. But maybe, you know, those are probably all good options for you guys out there. Just get a thread that lays down nice.
Yeah, nice and flat.
Yep. On the vise.
That's it.
Zebra Midge.
Yep.
Profound.
It's a must-have fly.
Yeah, and we'll cut to another little clip so that you guys can see a second clip of that.
They're not too exciting.
They aren't.
But
they aren't sexy.
No, they work though.
That's how like I think a lot of the most, I don't know, productive patterns that I have, they aren't the sexiest.
No. The sexiest ones are designed for fly fishermen, not fish.
Yeah. Yeah, the fish, they don't care. But they love zebra midges. Get those guys or tie them. Definitely suggest them. And now we can move on to
the meat.
I'm so disappointed in myself. Spoiling the meat.
Well, you got so worked up.
Just all excited.
It's okay.
I think it's my Electric Howler Brothers shirt over here. I'm just wound right to the max. Stocked fish, wild fish,
native fish.
Yeah, so that's the topic today: is stocked, wild, and native. And you know, it's going to be a little bit of education at first because, like, you know, we got a lot of newbies involved. But what does that even mean?
Yeah,
what does it even mean? That's something. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I first started, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, no, not really. I just wanted to catch a fish.
You just want to catch a fish. Yeah. And you didn't care.
Nope.
You just, finding a place where there were trout was a hard enough venture to begin with, you know, and then you're like, I want to catch them. And you don't put any thought to how they got there or if they have a negative effect on the ecosystem. Or, I mean, I didn't even think about that. I didn't have enough understanding or knowledge of riverine systems to like understand anything. I didn't understand bugs. I didn't understand anything, let alone, you know, that. But
I still barely understand
it. You go, yeah, well, yeah. You have those days where you're just like looking at your fly box. This looks bushy and looks like it might, you know, look like that possibly. The finger licker.
Yep. I see which way the wind's blowing.
Yeah. But yeah, so stocked fish essentially, guys, or we'll say stocked trout. Just say that. So a stocked trout or salmon is, you know, basically a fish that is reared and has lived its beginning life stages in a hatchery, and fed pellets, and it gets to an age or size where it's deemed that it's going to be stocked, whether that's 2 to 3 inch fingerlings, or that's a 12-inch trout, or that's a retired brood stock trout, you know, that are
could be up in the 20s.
Yeah, it could be really big.
Yep.
And then usually hatcheries or stocking from hatcheries, because there are some privately run hatcheries. So what I should say is the actual stocking of those fish into river systems, you know, typically happens from state agencies, you know, across the country.
Yep.
And there is some federal hatcheries and there is some federal stocking, but for this purpose, we're just kind of talking about local stocking.
We'll just talk about Maine in general.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we have a lot of stocked waters.
We do.
We do. And Maine is huge just from a state, square miles perspective.
Geography.
We're a big state.
We are.
And we're very, very lucky here in this state in that we have got so many lakes and ponds and rivers and streams. It's unbelievable.
Yep.
Like I went out west last summer and I was blown away by, you take for granted that when you go for a drive in Maine, there's just ponds and lakes and ponds.
Especially where we are.
Yeah, especially where we are. It's just they're everywhere.
Actually, no, it's pretty much the whole state.
It is. Yeah. It is. I mean, it's pretty crazy. Yeah. And like you'll be on dirt roads in the middle of nowhere and you just pop out and there'll be a little 5-acre, 10-acre pond and there isn't a camp on it. And like we have a lot of remote ponds and very lucky here in our state. You go out west and you drive hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles and you're like, where's a pond? And then like, there'll be these large rivers out there by the Rockies and they're like dammed up. And then everybody's like, that's where everybody goes and boats and everything is on these river reservoirs. It's just different than out here, but we're very lucky. So we have a ton of lakes, ponds and rivers and streams. And there's a lot of stocking that takes place in the state of Maine.
Yeah.
And it does give people a lot of opportunities to catch fish. And that's how we started.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I caught my first trout was on the little Androscoggin by my house and that's a stocked water.
Yeah. I didn't quite start on, I started on over wild native fish.
Yep.
But then to hone my skills and to get ahead, it was mostly over stocked stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we have interesting opportunities too. There's certain bodies of water here. Just so everybody knows, we aren't turning our nose up saying that there isn't a place for stocked fish.
No, there's definitely a place for stocked fish.
There's bodies of water here that are far too warm and far too segmented that can't really sustain wild trout populations. And a lot of them are stocked in the fall and they're open year round. And there's places that we don't fish at all until everything else is closed and it's December and we say, we'll go down. We'll fish for some stocked trout down there.
Yep.
And we do that. But there's places where it gets more muddy. And I think that's kind of where, we're kind of taking this a little bit. So we've just explained to you guys stocked trout and a little bit of the state of Maine where we are and the fact that we fish over stocked trout. And then that gets you into the conversation about wild and native trout though.
Yep.
And I used to, when I first started, I would get a little confused.
Yeah, a little confused on the subject. Yep.
Yeah, like because it takes a little while to kind of know the ecosystems in the state of Maine where you are. And like, but yeah, so just to describe this for our listeners, a wild trout, and that could take salmon too. I'm just saying that, is a fish that was procreated, born, raised, and has lived its life cycle in a wild environment.
Yep.
And
that population could have started out as a stocked population.
It could have started out as a stock population, 100%.
And there's a lot of waters in Maine where that did happen.
There is.
Yep.
And, this is an interesting conversation when you do talk about Maine or out west too, because out there they have a far more established population of wild trout that weren't originally native. So if you take brown trout and rainbow trout, which everybody thinks of going to Montana for gigantic brown trout, they aren't native.
Yep.
And we have wild rainbow trout here.
Yep.
And we do have limited wild brown trout in areas. The Androscoggin watershed where we fish and guide has a population of wild rainbow trout that has existed there since the 30s. So we're approaching 100 years.
Yep.
And Wyman, dam area, they have a population which, according to historical records, most likely established from the same federal stockings at the same time. And so those are two viable and, in my opinion, viable populations, and they're wild. And I think they've been here long enough that they have a seat at the table as far as talking about how important they are, but they aren't native.
Correct. Yeah.
They aren't native. Yeah. And but, and maybe John wants to jump in here, and talk more about natives. Cause we do have a lot of native.
We have a ton. You're more articulate on this stuff, but I mean, the natives have been here and they've always been here.
Always.
I mean, they're native, and I don't know. Our bodies of water with these just true native fish are not as big as they used to be. And
no,
and a lot of the stockfish have moved these native populations out or have decreased them in size to where it's become a concern where we have to start protecting the natives over some of the stock stuff.
Yeah.
You can go on more about it, but I mean,
well, and I think brook trout's a good, that's probably the best example of it.
Brook trout. Our state seems to want to just manage for brook trout. It's like our state fish, and apparently our state thinks they need to be in every body of water.
I know, it's kind of that's a sad one for me. And I wish that there could be a little bit of a shift in that regard, because, I even think it might be on the state website as far as what percentage of wild native brook trout there are that exist in the lower 48, and it Maine's got over 90%.
Oh, no doubt.
So why we need to stock them is kind of an interesting conversation.
I mean, like you said, there are certain bodies of water that, yeah, sure, go ahead, put them in there, because they're not going to stay alive or anything. But we tend, I don't say our state tends to put them in spots where there's already a native population.
Yeah.
And so they're stocking native brook trout.
Yeah.
I mean, they're stocking brook trout over native brook trout.
Right.
And in marginal places too.
In marginal places. And I think that it's important to note for the people that are listening, why that might be detrimental, because you might be saying, well, okay, so you put,
so what?
you put some stocked brook trout in the same waters as native brook trout. Okay, I mean, they're trout.
Yeah.
What does that mean? But we'll get into more we'll get more into depth about this in other episodes, most likely. But we won't get into the hardcore numbers and research, but essentially there is a lot of documentation and studies that have been done about the adverse effects of stocking catchable sized trout on top of wild trout. And some of these studies have seen as much as a 50% decrease in wild trout within the first year of stocking catchable trout over the top of them. So it becomes a very convoluted and difficult conversation when you're talking about people being happy because they're catching fish, but then at what point are you more concerned about what's happening to the ecosystem? And I think brook trout here in Maine is a perfect conversation, because I kind of feel like we owe it to them. When you talk about, we see so many species getting extinct every day.
Yep.
We got climate change, we have pollution, we have over harvesting of animals and fish, and you name it. And so at a certain point, how important is native animals or fish? It's not, I mean, you could make this even broader than what we're talking about with trout, and I think brook trout's that way. Maine is the last stronghold of native brook trout in the lower 48.
Yep.
And so what do we do? You know what I mean? And why do we stock trout over, why do we stock, brook trout over wild brook trout? And a lot of times, it gets down to Maine, our fish culture in Maine is probably different than
Yeah.
other places.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the metrics used are catch rate.
Yeah.
It's like they want to increase our catch rate in certain bodies of water.
Yeah.
And how they do that was with in my opinion, I think it's a genetically inferior strain that we stock over this strain that's evolved in the systems for hundreds, if not thousands of years,
Yeah. Yeah. In the catch rate model, I wish that we could see that change a little bit,
Yeah.
because in the people that I talk to, even in passing, like with us collecting cards and talking to people on the river this summer and stuff like that, you encounter people and they're like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, we're collecting data in hopes of maybe, there being some changes in the management here on our local waters." And people will be like, "Oh, we used to catch way less fish, but they were big."
Yep.
And they're like, "Man, I'd love to catch some big fish.
Yeah.
I'd float all day if I just had a chance at one big fish." You know what I mean? I think that
I'm in that boat too.
Yeah.
I would fish all day for 3 nice fish rather than 20
yeah.
10-inch fish.
Yeah, and I mean, I would, I'm even at a point where if I moved 3 good fish and didn't even connect on them, I would be happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And we do move fish and we're like, "Oh, that was good."
Yeah.
Like, at least we know there's something in there.
Yeah, but I think we're at a point where we're more involved in trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
And try to figure out kind of odd equations that are kind of out there, but that's kind of another topic of us searching with big streamers, which we can talk about that on another day.
Yeah.
But the brook trout thing, I would definitely agree that the catch rates, it's kind of a little bit of a model that's just easy for everybody to fall into. I think it's easy for us to fall into it as anglers. I think it's easy to fall into it from a management standpoint, because if you say, well, this body of water, they're only catching 0.5 trout per hour, or this body of water, they're catching, 1.5 trout per hour. And then I think it gets easy because brook trout catch rates are higher than other trout rates.
Yep.
They're easier to fool and to catch. So then it turns into, well, you just put some brook trout in there. I mean, it's an easy solution as far as catch rates are concerned.
Yeah.
But I think what ends up happening is you have more detrimental impacts from that. And I think too, like on the native conversation, like we were talking about brook trout being native, and before we started this episode too, which I'm going to get a little bit away from like native trout.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about just native fish too.
Oh, yeah.
Cause like, out West, there was a time where people just killed whitefish because they thought they were trash fish.
Yeah.
And then they found out like, oh, when the whitefish don't do good, the trout don't do good.
Yeah. And I don't think that's just an out West thing. And I believe there was, and there probably still is a subset culture in Maine that throw chubs out in the woods.
Yeah.
And I would never do that. That is, a chub is like a sign of a healthy river system and a beautiful native fish.
It is. And that's the thing that's funny is it's like if you have somebody catch a rainbow trout or a chub, they always look down on the chub and they love the rainbow trout, but the chub has more of a right to be in the river than the rainbow. Yeah. Same with browns.
Yep. In Maine. Yeah.
And in Maine, where we are. And yeah, I mean, I agree. I think you hear that a lot. Oh man, just caught a bunch of chubs, threw them in the woods. Yeah, like, why?
Yeah.
Why? And like suckers, suckers, they need good water.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's it's not necessarily a sign that you have great trout populations, but it's a sign that you have a healthy river.
Yeah, you've got a healthy ecosystem.
Right.
And that's, I mean, That's the seed that starts everything.
Exactly. And so then it comes down to then you got to figure out the equation of, well, why aren't trout doing good? Are they doing good? And so on and so forth. But like I was telling you about those suckers that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
And like John and I were talking earlier, and I was saying that I took my cousins out. This was years and years ago, and it was a section of river that has a lot of sediment and or sand. And there's a big pool, and it's the biggest pool that I know of in the section that we fish. It's almost 30 feet deep. It's very deep, and it happens to have this, I don't know, how high would you say that sand banking is? With the house that's about to fall in.
Yeah, I was 75 feet probably.
Yeah, it's high.
Yeah, it's pretty high.
It's crazy. It's unfortunately, it's just this eroding sandbank. And at certain times it's more vegetated than others. But anyways, below that, pool makes a turn, and then it bellies up. It tails out, and then you get into about chest deep water, and it's got a lot of sand sediment in there. And I was fishing there, and the sun was just right. And I've only witnessed it like this in this, like how many they were there. And it wasn't during spawn time. And they were just vacuum cleaning. They were coming down there. The suckers there was a school of suckers, and they were just methodically picking their way down through. But what was neat to watch was they were sucking up the sediment and getting the rocks and what have you, and kind of puffing everything out. And then they were getting whatever they were getting for, biomass off from it, forage. Yeah. And then they were just redispersing the aggregate.
Yep.
And I was like, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Turning up the bottom.
Up the bottom. Like, I wonder what that is. And I haven't looked into it. Maybe we should look into it. What like impact of suckers on stream health?
Farmer tilling up the field.
Yeah. Maybe they suck in all the toxins. The sponges.
I don't know. They're great to fish behind.
They are good to fish behind. But my point is, suckers are, they're native here, and they're in the spring when the suckers spawn. You can still spear them, and people do that. And,
I haven't seen it in a while.
No, there's some people that spear them down South Paris way still. But yeah, we got
up near me too. I guess I've seen a few.
Yeah, we have a town around here, North Paris, that's actually called Sakahaba.
Forgot about that. Oh my goodness, I forgot about that. Oh, my stepdad used to throw that one in. Sucker Harbor.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you headed over there to Sucker Harbor. Yeah. But that's because there would be a lot of suckers there in the spring. So anyways, I'm getting off on a tangent with the suckers and the fall fish. But my point in bringing up the suckers and fall fish is that
they're native.
They're native, in all native fish that exist in our ecosystems here are good fish. And that goes for forage fish too. Like, doesn't matter if you're talking about, dace or suckers or sculpin or, like all of that is just a marker of a healthy river system. So, but if we were going to talk, we kind of got a little bit into like our culture of like, stocked fish here a little bit. I mean that.
Yeah. I mean, the culture around here is like a lot of it's put and take.
Yeah.
Which is, I would rather that. I would rather them put those fish in and have everybody just keep them all.
Yeah.
Than let them disperse through the river.
Yeah.
I have no problem with that. Especially on rivers that like don't have a wild population, can't keep a wild population alive through the hot months, and don't have natives in it that it's detrimental to.
That's where I think it gets really convoluted because we do have bodies of water that are very segmented and small, or that are near more southern areas that don't really support wild populations of fish. But like up here where we are, I have a hard time with it because I hear that. You hear people say, oh, well, it's just a put and take fishery. Yeah. Or you hear people say, well, who cares if I'm fishing when the water's 75 degrees? It's put and take fishery. and they don't have the ability to actually know or be able to understand the difference between wild and stocked fish. And, you know, like up here, I can tell you 100%, if you go fishing in July, you aren't going to catch all stocked fish.
No.
You're going to end up catching some wild fish, and you're going to do some harm to that, you know, population. So that's where I think it gets sticky.
And you can't always tell. And if somebody tells you like, oh, I can 100% tell you if this is a stocked or wild fish, they're full of shit.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's fish that we find out that are stocked that we didn't think were, you know, stocked,
and vice versa.
We have fish that
we had a couple that we were like, that's a stocked fish.
Yeah.
And it came back as not.
Yeah, because all it has to do is be a little beat up. You know, like not all wild fish have got it easy out there. You know, it doesn't mean that every wild fish that you catch is going to have pristine fins.
Yeah. And we don't clip all the fins on our fish.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, I think like the stocking in management of stocked fisheries, it makes it muddy. And that's the hard part that I'm trying to convey. And I'm probably not doing a good job of talking about it and conveying. But when you get into, I think you see a lot of management where it becomes a public thing. Like, so you hear about catch rates all the time.
Yep.
And how many people have you heard say, well, it's a put and take fishery?
Well, a lot.
A lot.
Most of the people you talk to when you talk about a management plan.
I just lost this. I play with this all the time. I just lost it right in there. Lost my tea tag in my tea.
Your tea tag.
My tea tag. My peppermint tea tag. Yes. No, I agree. You hear it a lot, and then it comes down to how comfortable are you with having what's the best to happen for the ecosystem, as opposed to if you just want to show up and catch fish all the time.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part, because I've had, when I first started, I very much so was part of the culture where I just wanted to catch a lot of fish all the time. And I didn't care. I just wanted to catch them.
Yeah. And if you look at where we're doing our work, our study work,
Yeah.
I think if what goes into effect, what we want to happen, I think catch rates will go down. I most definitely they will, but I think the quality of fish will increase. I think we'll see bigger, nicer fish. At least that's my hope.
Well, and that's the thing is, and there's a lot of research, which we'll get into this, like I said, in another episode, but like, you know, the hard part is when you stock catchable size trout on top of a trout population, it usually affects the older class fish and the mid class fish. You still oftentimes will still not lose a population of your really small fish, but it just displaces the social structure of the river. And what's interesting about stocked fish and wild fish, which I can't believe we didn't get into this, and for the listeners, you should like look this up yourself. But wild fish are conditioned, and it's survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
So like John did touch on this, where like they've been there forever.
Yeah.
They know what to do. Genetically, only the strongest are surviving.
Yep.
The weakest are dying.
Yeah.
But the opposite happens in a hatchery, because like what happens in a hatchery is if you have, say you got a tank and you got fish, the trout with the most wild characteristics in that tank goes to the far end of the tank and doesn't want to feed, and it dies. The fish with the least wild characteristics is the ones that come over. They aren't scared of humans. They aren't scared of being near the surface in the middle of the day.
Yep.
And that's why, you know, like I read a study the other day where they were talking about stocked fish is their predisposition to feed on the surface unnaturally. So, because all they've eaten is pellets. And if the quicker you get the pellets when they hit, you know, if you're sitting at the bottom of all those fish, you're probably not going to get much.
Yeah. So the most opportunist fish survives. Like,
right.
going against his natural instinct to be wary of
Exactly.
things.
So that's kind of another aspect of the wild versus stock. So you're putting a fish into an ecosystem that really has not been conditioned to live there. And you see varying numbers, but in river systems, up to 98% of trout stock die within the first year. But in general, you see numbers that are over 90%. It's very, very, very high. And so then it gets into like, how cost effective is this? Is it more cost effective to manage for, you know, river health and to spend your money with habitat improvements and doing what you can do to help the fish that are there? Or is it more cost effective to stock? There's a lot of numbers on that. And, you know, in general, you know, stocking fish is expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Stocking catchable size fishes.
It is. And it's not a long-term solution.
No. We're not exactly sure what the number is. We're guessing around $5 a catchable size, like a 10-inch fish.
Yeah. I mean, that's what they're saying. I do remember reading an article at one point that was higher than that, but like, it's a lot, you know. I mean, there's hatcheries involved. They got to rear them. They got to feed them. They got to pay people to take over them. Then they got to load them. Then they got to truck them. Then they got to throw them off bridges.
Yep. Drop them out of airplanes.
And it's like, and then we got, you know, I think, yeah, I mean, you got to do that, you know, like that's how I've seen it done.
Me too.
But then it gets into like, I don't know. Then we start getting kind of a little bit too big for our pants, you know, as far as like genetically altering fish. And you got,
putting the weird Frankenfish in.
Yeah. You got, you know, tiger trout and Palomino goldies or whatever they call them.
I don't understand those ones.
Yeah. I mean, we got splake.
Yeah. We've got a lot of splake in me.
Yeah. Sterile fish. It's a combination of a brook trout and a lake trout. And I mean, and then at that, I don't know. It's just like ethically.
I mean, the one good thing about them is they don't reproduce, supposedly.
Yeah, and I mean that is, but then at the same time, it's like you're sitting there saying, how cost effective is it to produce a fish that doesn't reproduce? I mean, maybe you should just manage for wild fish that reproduce.
Yeah.
You know, like it's a heavy topic.
Yeah.
It's a heavy topic. It's a big topic. I have, you know, my opinions on it, and I don't think that they're everybody's, you know what I mean? But I think there's a place for stocked fish.
Oh, there's definitely. I think it needs to be more targeted and more strategic than carpet bombed.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you know, you got like the pressure, and, you know, we talked a little bit about Maine's like culture with stocking, but you know, I grew up, I was just talking to my uncle about this the other day, cause we grew up, you know, poor.
Yeah.
And like when we were little, I would go out back and catch a brook trout all the time and come home and cook them. Yeah. I mean, I started catching brook trout when I was 5.
Yeah.
And, you know, he had times where he's like, I mean, it was like, you know, if I happened to get out and I caught a nice trout or something, that was a meal.
Yeah.
Like, and I really did look at that. And I think that that still exists, you know what I mean? For sure. But I think we're seeing a little bit of a shift where it's not so much about keeping every fish that you caught.
Yeah. I don't see too many like things like I have in the past where it's like we caught 30 fish and we kept them all.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm sure there's still some people that do it, but I don't think it's as cool as it used to be. I
don't think so either. And I think that we are seeing a little bit of a culture shift of people being more moderate, you know, with that approach.
I don't want to come off as like I'm against keep fish.
Yeah.
If you can, if it's legal to keep fish and eat fish.
Yeah, well, and the thing is my whole take is, I mean, if we manage for wild fish and manage the ecosystems properly, then you can determine whatever that rate is, whether it's catch. There are bodies of water where they should be catch and release. There's bodies of water where maybe you can keep one trout if you want to. I'm primarily a catch and release guy myself. I have no problem saying that at all. I don't even know when the last time was that I kept a trout.
I go on the body's water and I forget. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I should have kept that just for ecological reasons rather than
Yeah.
I'm hungry.
Yeah, I mean, there's places like that. Like, obviously, I think if you go in on the Rapid River and there's a, crap ton of salmon in
Yeah.
there, it's not, that should be a brook trout river. You know what I mean? And that gets into native versus wild, because salmon are not native there, so that's a whole,
Neither are smallmouth.
yeah. That's
probably the bigger problem. Wow. An equal problem.
Yeah. Yeah. The brook trout have it hard up there, but I have no problem admitting though that I am catch and release. And the way that I describe it to people that are like blown away by that is I just tell them I like catching them more than I like eating them. That's how I describe it. And I mean, and I actually I'm not a huge freshwater fish fan.
Me either.
I like saltwater fish. If I was to have freshwater fish, it would be if I was on a camping trip and I caught some little pan-sized brook trout. Like
I used to enjoy a good smelt fry.
Yeah,
but I haven't had those forever.
I'm not a small guy.
Yeah, I think it's more just like the camaraderie and like the whole experience.
When I was a little kid, I loved them.
Yeah,
and the last time I had them, I was just like. They're too fishy.
It didn't live up to the hype.
No, probably it was
The
just
memory.
it was probably just really built up kind of in my mind. But the back to the wild thing though, I think something that, and we'll probably have an episode on this guy just solely at some point. His life history is pretty cool, and I'd really love to kind of have an episode on Richard Vincent, or Dick Vincent for short. And look him up.
Oh, definitely look him up. He's done a ton.
He has, and he's there's some cool interviews that like some different libraries and state universities out there in Montana did of him, and some transcripts. Plus, you can read his studies and his impacts. But essentially, Dick was a young gun in the late 60s who was very controversial.
Yeah.
And he kind of pioneered electroshocking as a tool. He was a biologist in Montana. And they largely accredited as the man that made Montana wild. And they have a policy where they do not stock trout over wild trout in rivers. And that's a statewide policy.
Yeah, and it's been hugely successful.
Yeah.
But people will come back to you, but Alex, Montana's not Maine.
Yeah, they will. Then I have heard that a lot. And my take on that is like if you take like a big part of his study that he did was he thought that stalking was impactful on wild fish. So he stalked a wild river that they had a baseline data set for. And in 1 year, there was a 50% reduction of wild fish. And so my take when I hear that, like, but Maine's not Montana and that kind of stuff, is I'm like, well, if Montana had a 50% reduction of wild fish in 1 year, imagine what more marginal waters like Maine would have from stalking in 1 year. Probably more profound.
Yeah, quite possibly. Bigger decrease.
But I mean, even if it was 50%, I mean, 50% is huge.
It's huge.
But yeah, you hear that like, well, we need stocking because I don't know if we have the ability to recover, and like locally here in, on our waters on the Andro, they made it through this river, making the top 5 most polluted list in the country.
Yeah. I think we're number 1 actually.
Yeah. Like, so pretty bad. Like, I mean,
really bad.
the Androscoggin River, I read about it, and down in Lewiston, Auburn, they said people couldn't pass. Well, some people could, but it would be very common if you were in the 50s driving across the bridge where the falls were to see people throwing up that were walking across the bridge because they couldn't make it the whole way across the river because the odor was so strong.
I've also read in that same stretch, it would literally peel the paint off houses.
Yeah,
for real.
Yeah.
That's how.
Yeah.
And then the Clean Water Act was passed
In 72.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, his name starts with an M. He was from Rumford, the representative who started that. But yeah, the Andro it had zero. There were times where sections of it had a 0% dissolved oxygen content.
Yeah, it's good.
Uninhabitable to anything that breathes air.
It's winning.
So, but those rainbow trout, they made it.
They did somehow.
Yeah. I mean, they went up small tributaries and rivers that we had clean water that was getting pumped in, and they made it with no stalking.
Yep. Got out of the main stem so they could breathe.
Oh, fresh water. But yeah, I mean, so.
And we've seen a great comeback in the river.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing.
It's a super fun site.
It is a fun site. And it's really awesome that we have a wild population still today.
Yeah.
And I think that their ability to be even better.
It goes to show you how like nature will find a way.
It will.
When given a chance.
And I think that I just personally speaking, think that the strain of wild rainbow trout that we have with that survival of the fittest aspect that we were talking about, like, I think it's a particularly resilient strain.
Yeah. Do we know where that strain came from? We were thinking it came from the federal government, but we don't know.
I would love to know.
Yeah, maybe that's something to dive into.
Yeah. I mean, I would assume, so in the 20s and 30s, I would assume because of you can read the research. The history of like the rainbow trout inhabiting the U.S.
Isn't it crazy? Like how like just some dude just went around.
Yeah, and it's like, but I mean,
it got into a train with like buckets of fish.
But they all started on the West Coast.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And it's like, but then like we're sitting here, and this is where it gets really funny too, where you talk, native versus wild is like, like I went out west and was fishing for wild cutthroat, and it's like the rainbow trout is devastating out there.
Yeah,
they're more vigorous, I guess, than a cutthroat, and they can kind of push them off, and there's hybridization, and like it's been really bad. So, I mean, they're out there trying to reestablish cutthroat habitat.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of devastating what's happened. It'd be the same thing here if, a rainbow trout had the same effect on a brook trout, you know what I mean? And,
well, look at our blueback trout. Those are
gone. Pretty much
all but gone.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few spots that are still protected, but
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. And that was a stalking related impact, like the Rangeley River system. The Rangeley Lake region, for people that don't know, they didn't have landlocked salmon, and it was the most amazing brook trout fishery that ever existed. Way better than what we see today. Way larger sizes, more prolific, and the brook trout fed on blueback trout. Yeah.
Yep.
And then in the early 1900s, they said, "Boy, these Sebago Lake salmon are really cool. We ought to have these up to Rangeley." And then they went up, and they're much faster, much more prolific feeder, and they completely decimated the blueback trout. And then they became extinct, and then they had a collapse where they didn't have forage.
Yeah, so we introduced smelt.
So you had to at that point, So there's these long, it's the pebble getting dropped into the pond thing.
Yep, just ripples out.
It just ripples out, and so those ripples can go so far, you just don't know what they're going to touch.
Yeah,
And that's why I would argue that, you know, it's always good to manage for wild fish and native fish if possible whenever you can. And
Yeah, not every body of water needs everything.
yeah.
I mean, we live in an age where we can get in a vehicle and we can travel to catch a specific thing that should be there in a specific place.
I agree. And, you know, it's one of those hard things because take the Androscoggin River here, you know, like we have everything.
We have a smattering of everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can go out and catch about everything, but, you know, does that mean that that's good for the ecosystem? And does that mean that you can do all of those well?
Yeah.
Probably not, you know, and I see that a lot, you know, but it's funny because, like, you know, we'll fish down our way for big landlocked salmon, and I love that, you know, and we might catch a few little brook trout, but it's primarily big salmon. But like then when I go up to Rangeley, like I just want to catch big brook trout,
and you could give a crap about the salmon.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care at all.
Yeah,
and I'm fine with that, but it's hard because, like, and you see it
a
with,
lot of people love it though.
a lot of people love it, and you see it with you see it a lot with lakes and ponds too, you know, where they're like, okay, well, we're going to have lake trout, and we're going to have rainbow trout, we're going to have salmon, and we're going to have brown trout, and, like, you know, do you need all of them?
But I want yeah. No, my favorite thing, like you just said, I love going someplace to target a specific thing,
especially if they're supposed to be there, and especially if they're established there, and especially if they're wild, and especially if they do well. You know, that's the thing, is like you can't be it's kind of like the simple, you know, you can't be all things to all people. I mean, everybody's heard that, and it's true in, like, or moderation, and, you know, in everything, you know, that kind of thing. Like, it holds true, I think, for like fisheries management. And I would love to see that shift in that regard too, you know, where we go from, we don't need everything.
Yeah.
And then I'd like to also, eventually, it would be awesome to see a shift where we say, well, let's not even think about catch rates, you know, like, let's think about what's healthy. And why don't you figure out what is the natural carrying capacity of this body of water? Manage to that.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to say, let's manage for catch. The problem is when you manage for catch rates, it ends up making you stock so many fish that you're sometimes stocking 10 times more than what the carrying capacity is.
Than what the river can actually sustain.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we see that. And, you know, I think that you could attribute part of the collapse that the upper Androscoggin River saw in the early 2000s to overstocking, you know, because when it did its best was after the Clean Water Act. Everybody forgot about it for over 20 years.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything. Everybody thought it was polluted. And then suddenly somebody started, geez, why is there like 22-inch brown trout and rainbow trout in here?
Yep.
And unfortunately, we don't have a data set though for those times. So, but we do know that not stocking worked at that point in time. And we also know during the 90s, they had warm water situations just like we have today.
Yep.
So stocking, it has its place.
Yeah. There's a time and a place.
Yep. Yep. It has its place.
Yep.
And I would say, do your own research and look into it. You know what I mean? And just find out your own little places that, you know, you can fall in love with. Because I think that's where most people end up getting to know more about an ecosystem and having a discussion with other people about it and about management, is when they fall in love with it. So get out there, you know, don't just follow the stocking trucks around.
Yeah, it's an easy trap to fall into.
It's an easy trap to fall into.
Yeah. You won't learn. You won't learn as much, and it won't make you a better fisherman either. But
no,
if you need that fix,
yeah,
that I mean that's my time and my place. I'm like, okay, just about everything's all shut down. I would really like to catch a fish, and I know a body of water where they stock the living bejesus out of it.
Yeah.
And I'll go catch a few, and that
Yeah.
tides me over.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do the same thing. And, I think that's where the conversation gets tough, though, is it's like, where do you draw the line? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because everybody draws their own line at a different place. And that's why I think research and data is the most important thing, because I think that we got to somehow create a defined line on where you do manage for wild fish and where you don't manage for wild fish. And I think that the brook trout one is a much easier line to draw.
Yeah.
In that, if you have wild brook trout, why you stock wild brook trout over them? And to be honest with you, if you have a state that has over 90% of the lower 48's wild brook trout, why you even need to have a brook trout hatchery program, I don't know.
Yeah. Have it and ship them to different states.
Yeah, like
make some money on it.
We got brook trout.
Sell them.
It's like, I mean, if you're in the state of Maine and you find a
puddle,
yeah, I mean,
it's amazing the little trickles that you can go up, like drainage ditches. You can go up and catch wild brook trout.
Yeah, I mean, if it's like you said, if it's a trickle and there's a tree canopy over it and it stays out of the sun, guess what? You're gonna find some little teeny tiny brook trout in it. I mean, I've found brook trout in little teeny trickles that are this wide.
Oh, me too.
You find them everywhere. Like they exist everywhere, and how many of these brook trout species could get bigger if they didn't have other trout stocked in the larger stems of rivers and they had more use.
Yeah.
I think it'd be pretty amazing. I mean,
that's a whole nother thing we didn't get into, like the stock trout taking out the prime lays in the cold water before the wild trout get a chance to.
Yeah. And
we could go on and on.
No, I mean, I think it's great. That's a great point to make. Yeah, I mean, we didn't even get into, there's a whole aspect of, like, especially in the river system that we guide and fish on, is these fish are nomadic and they got to find cold water at certain times of year. But oftentimes where the stocking takes place is at the exact locations where the best cold water refuge exists. So you see a warming trend in the river, and then but you've got sometimes 1,000 brook trout sitting in these lies.
Yeah, because the stocked ones, at least my experience is, they tend to stay together. Especially stocked brook trout, they don't tend to disperse as much as the rainbows and the browns. They tend to stick together.
Strength in numbers.
Yeah, so if you find one, you're gonna find a lot more usually.
And then that gets into stocking creating pressure, which that can happen, because people fish the areas where stocking takes place. And those might be areas where the prime cold water refuge is for your wild fish. And it really turns into a pretty complicated issue.
Problem real quick.
It does really, really quick. And we've seen like that one spring hole that we know, people have dammed that off before and trapped wild trout or even stocked trout in there, at times. And it becomes a complicated issue really quick. But, the stock fish, if a stocked fish, first of all, some of these areas that
let's go all the way back to the beginning.
Some of these things that we're talking about where there's stocked fish in a cold water refuge area, oftentimes when we see that, there's not even a sustainable amount of stocked trout in that cold water refuge area.
No.
So there isn't enough biomass to support the amount of fish that are there, let alone if a wild fish wants to be in the mix.
Yep.
So there's a lot of areas where wild fish are really getting the bottom of the barrel when it comes to where they want to go. They got it hard. And if they had full access to the river that we have, I am very convinced that within 3 to 5 years, we could see a recovery to a point where people would be happy with what they were catching.
I don't even think it would take that long, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm really optimistic.
I am too. And I think I mean, I think we're going to, trophy fish, we might have to see a little bit longer time, but like numbers wise,
3 to 5. Yeah, probably.
But like, it's tough because if you take a body of water like what we're on here, it's marginal. And what I mean by that is, and I don't know if I've said this in a previous podcast, but our water temps do get warm. So you're marginal in that regard. Our flows can get low in the summer. It is, like I've said, very much like a freestone stream out west. So like our fish are very nomadic. They got to move around and forage. We have bug life. We don't have as prolific a bug life as, out west or, the Catskills or something like that. We don't have like that limestone kind of impact and what have you. So it's an ecosystem that we know historically produced and did extremely well, but it has to be managed a certain way. And it definitely produced trophy fish when it was managed by not stocking, letting nature run its course and do its thing.
Yeah, when it was forgotten about.
And I think that we might need to get into other specialized regulations too, which we don't have to get into now because we were talking mostly about stock fish. But we could talk about stock fish forever.
Yeah,
it's I don't know. Maybe we should just end it here and then we can pick up at another time. I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to add to it?
Part 2? No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we could go on, but I mean, just piling it on.
Yeah. It's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that we have some of our newbie listeners that, this is kind of a new conversation too.
Yeah. I don't know. Last word, there's a time and a place for them. And like, I don't know, it's a good way to start out.
Yeah. And like, I think being more thought out about where it happens and where it doesn't happen. And I would like to see us having a more clear switch on where that happens from a management standpoint and I think that I'd like to see more fisheries managed for wild fish, if at all possible, even if that's at the detriment of
native fish.
Catch rates.
Oh, catch rates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, if we measure everything by catch rates, then we aren't going to manage for wild fish.
Yep. Definitely.
But I think that's where that's our job as a guide. And I know I've said this before, but as a guide, is it your job to make everybody catch as many fish as humanly possible? Or at a certain point, is it a combination of that and also being a good steward of the river and explaining how special things are?
Yeah, it's definitely a combination. I mean, you have to protect your resource, and people have to have fun and enjoy what they're doing. But you and I are, I don't know, we're different than a lot of people because, I mean, we get enjoyment and we kind of hype up people when they catch non-trouty species.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah. I mean, we can make a bad day good.
Yeah.
Yeah. By catching.
They're all good. I mean, my joke is always any day on the river is a good day.
Yeah.
I've even had rainy days that are good days.
Rainy days are great.
I just appreciate,
what else are you going to do?
I just appreciate that departure from everyday life.
Yeah.
Just being on the river. It's just it's the way it's meant to be. You just get out there and everything feels right.
I'm going to go back to rainy days. Fishing is great because on a rainy day, you're oh, it's too rainy to work. Let's go fish. Makes sense, right? I don't know how many days of work I skipped because it was raining.
Well, concrete though, you got a good excuse with that. Back in the day, I'd be sitting in an excavator or something like that. And I still got a windshield wiper. So I'd have to break that. Then I could go.
Oh. Chris and I were in the union. And it's like, yeah, felt the drop.
Yeah,
That's it.
you gotta
Pack
go.
her up.
It's time to go. Time to go. Oh my word. Yeah. Yeah. I think that I hope that this podcast, this episode, is not judgmental, and I hope that we just
it's like I hope it's a serious topic that that's not super serious. It shouldn't be taken lightly, but I mean, it's like, I don't know.
Well, I think I know what you're saying,
Yeah.
and I think we're in the same boat in that, like, it is a serious topic. However, it's a discussion for us to have, and I think the hope that we have is that
I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings about it.
or create an argument. I guess, like, at the end of the day, what I'm saying is, like, I'm not sitting here trying to create an argument, because if two people start fighting about something, then nothing good's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, like, I think it's an important topic. It's something to think about. I think people do some reading, do your own research and let us know. I mean, who knows? We might get all kinds of comments on this one.
Maybe
not.
Maybe not. I don't know. I hope, I think more change is coming. I think a lot more people are starting to wanting to protect what's out there.
Yeah. And I think that goes beyond fisheries.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I agree with that. I think that you're seeing more conscientious, just people, or even just what they decide to buy for clothing, or, all these different things. Everybody's just, they're more conscientious about the environment and biodegradable products and, you name it. I agree. And we have a good group of those people that stay here at the yurts too. Like, that's the one thing that I'd say has been really, really neat, that I didn't know when I started this up here what our renting group would be.
Yeah.
And they're just, leave no trace behind, pack in, pack out, respectful people. They use our 128 acre facility here in a very respectful way. And I think that's just indicative of, I think we are kind of seeing a culture shift.
Yeah, I'll agree. A lot of, like, even the main guide test has kind of swung a little bit to more conservation type things, being stewards of the land. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and
it's nice.
I think it's good that they've done that, and I think that is. I mean, I agree. I think that's our job.
Oh, definitely.
I think our job is to represent the state of Maine well, and
protect it,
and to educate our guests so that they're making good, our clients, so that they're making good decisions when they go out. If they do a 1-day fishing trip with us, and then they are out fishing for 4 other days, a lot of what we impart to them is going to be really important.
Yeah,
and it's more important for me to be a good steward than it is to,
especially as you're getting older, you kind of want to give back more than it's given to you.
Yeah, I agree. Not just a user.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I got deep towards the end.
That somber note.
Get out and go fish.
Do it. Tie a zebra midge. Go tie a zebra midge. Go catch a stock trout.
Yeah. Go catch a wild trout. Then go catch a native trout if you can find one.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening, and let us know what you think.
Thanks for putting up with us.
I think that was a rant. A ramble. No, that's what I should say.
A ramble. Yeah. That was a ramble.
Blah, 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 blah.
All right. Well,
all right.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.